The first time my sister told people I was adopted, it was at a birthday dinner I hadn't wanted to attend. It was loud, overcrowded, the kind of restaurant where conversations overlap and no one listens closely unless they're waiting for something sharp to land. I was halfway through my drink when she laughed, too brightly, and said it. "Oh, you didn't know?" she told the table. "She's adopted." The words slid out like a joke she'd rehearsed. Adopted. I remember the way the laughter stuttered. A few people smiled awkwardly. Someone said, "Oh," as if they'd just learned a fun fact. Another person glanced at me, then away, unsure where to look. I didn't say anything. Not because I was ashamed, but because the way she said it told me exactly what she wanted. A reaction, confusion, defense, something she could twist into proof that she was right to say it in the first place. I gave her nothing. She noticed. She always noticed when I didn't perform the role she'd written for me. "Oh, don't be so sensitive," she added quickly when the silence stretched a second too long. "I mean, it's not a secret or anything. It's kind of obvious." Obvious. I took a sip of my drink and smiled, faintly. "That's interesting," I said. "I don't remember you being there." Her smile tightened. That was the first time I realized she'd been waiting for years to say it out loud. The second time was worse. It was at our mother's retirement party, a room full of people who had known me since childhood, neighbors, colleagues, family friends who'd watched me grow up and never once questioned where I came from. My sister stood near the center of the room, glass raised, attention secured. She'd always been good at that, commanding space without appearing to try. "I just want to say," she began, "that family is family, blood or not." A ripple of polite nods. She glanced at me. "And we all love her, even though she's not biologically related." The room froze. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed nervously, assuming it had to be a joke because surely no one would do that on purpose. My mother went pale. My father looked confused. And my sister smiled, soft, benevolent, satisfied. That was the moment I understood something important. She wasn't trying to reveal a truth. She was trying to rewrite one. After that, it became a pattern. At first, it was subtle. She's adopted, so she's always been a little different. She's adopted, so she doesn't really get how our family works. She's adopted, so you can't expect her to react like the rest of us. Each time she said it, she watched closely, waiting for my face to change, waiting for me to protest. I didn't. Not because it didn't bother me, but because something about the way she said it felt off, too confident, too rehearsed. As if she wasn't revealing something she knew, but something she needed everyone else to believe. My parents avoided the subject. They didn't correct her in public. They didn't confirm it either. They just smiled tightly and changed the conversation, as though silence could smooth over the cracks. It didn't. Silence never does. The confrontation happened on a Tuesday evening. Not dramatic, not planned. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, when my sister leaned against the counter and said, casually, "You know people are starting to ask questions, right?" I didn't look at her. "About what?" "About you," she said. "They're confused." I turned off the faucet. "Confused about what?" I asked. She shrugged. "Your background, where you came from. I mean, you don't look like us." There it was, the thing she'd been circling for years. "What do you mean by that?" I asked quietly. She smiled. "You know what I mean." "No," I said. "I don't." Her smile faltered for just a second. "You're adopted," she said flatly. "It's not a bad thing. I don't know why you're acting like it is." I turned and faced her fully then. "When," I asked, "did you decide that?" She rolled her eyes. "I didn't decide it. I've always known." "Known how?" I asked. She hesitated. Just a fraction. "Mom told me," she said, "years ago." I studied her face.
the way her eyes flicked away too quickly, the way her confidence came back just a beat too late. "That's funny," I said. "Why?" she snapped. "Because Mom's never told me that," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "That's because you're sensitive." "No," I said, "it's because it's not true." Her laugh was sharp, defensive. "Wow," she said, "denial much?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached for the drawer where my parents kept important papers, birth certificates, insurance documents, old report cards they'd never thrown away. She watched me with open irritation. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Looking," I said. "For what?" "For proof," I replied. She scoffed. "You won't find anything. Adoption records are sealed." I paused, then slowly closed the drawer. "Is that what you're counting on?" I asked. She crossed her arms. "You can't seriously think Mom would lie." I met her gaze. "I think," I said, "you're lying." Her face flushed. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "Why would I lie about that?" I tilted my head slightly. "Why would you need to tell everyone?" I asked. She didn't answer. That silence told me more than any confession could have. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because I was spiraling, but because something inside me had clicked into place. If I was adopted, there would be records, documents, traces, paperwork. Hospitals don't just hand babies over without leaving a trail. And if I wasn't, then my sister had been telling a very specific lie, one designed to make me feel like an outsider, one designed to make her feel like the authority on who belonged. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I didn't Google myself. I didn't search adoption laws. I started with what I already had, my birth certificate. The original one, issued by the hospital, not the copy you request later, the one my parents had kept in a sealed envelope at the back of the file cabinet. I'd seen it before, never questioned it, until now. The next morning, I asked my mother for it. She froze, just for a second, then smiled too quickly. "Why?" she asked. "Because I want to see it," I said. She hesitated. "Is this about what your sister's been saying?" "Yes," I replied. "She's just dramatic. You know how she is." "Then there's no harm in letting me see it," I said calmly. My mother looked at me for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Fine," she said. "It's in the cabinet." I retrieved it myself, sat at the table, opened the envelope. Everything looked normal at first. My name, the hospital, the date, my parents' names listed clearly, unmistakably. No amendments, no seals, no second page. I felt a slow, steady calm settle over me. I wasn't adopted, which meant my sister had been lying for years. But the question that followed was far more unsettling. Why? I didn't confront her right away. I needed more than certainty. I needed something she couldn't talk her way out of. So I kept digging. Hospital records, pediatrician files, school enrollment forms, every document that had followed me since birth. They all told the same story. Consistent, unbroken, ordinary. And yet, there it was, one missing piece. A folder in my parents' file cabinet labeled legal. Inside it, behind old wills and insurance policies, was a thinner envelope, unlabeled, yellowed at the edges. I opened it carefully. Inside were copies of documents I had never seen before. Not adoption papers, something else. Something that made my stomach drop, not with fear, but with recognition. Because suddenly, the lie made sense. And it wasn't about adoption at all. It was about something my sister never expected me to find. I slid the documents back into the envelope and closed it. My hands were steady. My mind was clear. She wanted a story where I didn't belong. What she didn't realize was that stories leave evidence, and I was done letting her tell mine. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was panicking, but because my mind refused to slow down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that envelope again. the way it had been tucked behind documents no one ever revisited, the way it didn't belong, yet had clearly been meant to stay hidden. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. My sister hadn't invented the adoption lie randomly. She'd built it to cover something else. I waited 2 days before bringing it up again, not because I needed courage, but because I needed her comfortable. People reveal the most when they think they've already won. It happened on Thursday evening. My parents were out. The house was quiet in that specific way that invites honesty or cruelty, sometimes both. My sister was in the living room, scrolling through her phone, legs tucked under her like she owned the space by default. I sat across from her. She glanced up. "What?" "I looked into it," I said. She rolled her eyes. "Into what?" "The adoption thing," I replied calmly. Her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. "And?" she said, too casually. "And you're wrong," I said. "There's no record of it, anywhere." She smirked. "Of course there isn't. Adoption records are sealed." I smiled faintly. "Not the ones you're thinking of," I said. She scoffed. "You're obsessed." "No," I replied. "I'm thorough." That got her attention. She sat up straighter. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" I asked. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've been embarrassing me publicly for years." Her jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being precise," I said. "There's a difference." She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "What exactly are you trying to prove?" "That you're lying," I said. She laughed sharply. "About what?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I stood and walked to the hallway. "Where are you going?" she asked. I returned with the envelope. Her face changed the moment she saw it. Not shock, recognition. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. "What's that?" she asked. "You tell me," I said, placing it on the coffee table between us. She stared at it like it might speak. "I've never seen that before," she said. "Neither had I," I replied, "until this week." She crossed her arms. "So?" "So," I continued, "you've been telling people I was adopted, but these documents don't support that." She shrugged. "Then what do they say?" I opened the envelope, slowly, carefully, pulled out the first page and held it up. Her breath caught, just slightly. "This," I said, "is a notarized custody agreement." Her eyes flicked from the page to my face. "That doesn't mean anything," she said quickly. "It means," I replied, "that there was a legal dispute involving me when I was an infant." She scoffed. "Lots of families have legal disputes." "Yes," I said, "but most don't resolve them quietly and then pretend they never happened." Her voice sharpened. "You're reaching." I pulled out the second document. "This," I said, "is a paternity acknowledgement." Her color drained. Not all at once, but enough. She stood abruptly. "You shouldn't be looking at that." "Why?" I asked. "Because it complicates your story?" "You're twisting things," she snapped. "No," I said, "I'm reading them." She started pacing. "You don't understand." "That's interesting," I said, "because you've been very comfortable telling people what I am without understanding anything at all." She stopped pacing and faced me. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. I met her gaze. "Because you made it public," I said. "You don't get to control the narrative anymore." She laughed bitterly. "You think this proves something?" "It proves you know more than you've said," I replied. She folded her arms tighter. "You're not adopted. Happy?" I tilted my head. "That's it?" She rolled her eyes. "That's what you wanted, right?" "No," I said. "What I want is to know why you wanted people to think I wasn't really part of this family." Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback ready. Later that night, I confronted my mother, not aggressively, not emotionally, just directly. She was folding laundry when I placed the envelope on the bed beside her. She froze. "Where did you find that?" she asked. "In the cabinet, behind the wills." She sighed and sat down heavily. "I always wondered when you'd see it," she said. My stomach tightened. "You knew," I said. She nodded slowly. "Yes." "And you let her lie?" I asked. "She wasn't lying," my mother said quietly. I stared at her. "Then what was she doing?" "She was simplifying," my mother replied. That word hit harder than I expected. "Simplifying what?" I asked. My mother looked up at me. "Belonging," she said. I laughed once, short, disbelieving. "You let her tell people I was adopted to make her feel secure?" My mother flinched. She struggled. "So did I said, "but I didn't get to rewrite reality." My mother rubbed her temples. "You don't understand what it was like back then." "Then explain it," I said. She hesitated. Then she reached for the envelope. "There was another woman," she said quietly. The room seemed to shrink. "Another woman?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, "before you were born." My heart thudded, not with fear, but clarity. "Your father," my mother continued, "said she had proof." I swallowed. And she was partly right, my mother said. The words landed gently and shattered everything anyway. "What does that mean?" I asked. My mother looked up at me. "Your father had a brief relationship before we were married. He didn't know she was pregnant until after you were born." My chest tightened. "She came forward," my mother continued. "There was a dispute, tests, lawyers." "And me?" I asked. "You were the result," she said.
The world didn't spin, it sharpened. "So I wasn't adopted," I said slowly. "No," my mother replied, "but you weren't uncomplicated." I stared at her. "You chose to raise me," I said. "Yes," she said quickly, "of course." "But you let her," I gestured vaguely toward the living room, "turn that into a joke." My mother's eyes filled. "I thought if we didn't talk about it, it would fade." "Instead," I said, "she weaponized it." My mother nodded. "She always needed to feel secure," she said, "special." "And I was the threat?" I asked. My mother didn't answer. That was answer enough. The next day, my sister called me. Her tone was lighter than it had any right to be. "So," she said, "you satisfied now?" "No," I replied, "but I understand you." She laughed. "That's rich." "You knew," I said, "about the other woman, about the dispute." Silence. "Then, Mom told you?" "Yes," I said. She exhaled sharply. "It wasn't a big deal." "You turned it into one," I replied, over and over. She snapped. "You think it was easy, growing up with everyone watching you?" I frowned. "Watching me?" She laughed, bitter and hollow. "You were the question mark, the one no one wanted to explain." I felt something settle in my chest. "So you erased me," I said, "by pretending I didn't really belong." She didn't deny it. "You always had Dad," she said. "I had to compete." I shook my head. "You weren't competing, you were rewriting." She scoffed. "Same thing." "No," I said quietly, "it's not." She hung up. That evening, I laid the documents out on my desk again, not because I needed reassurance, but because I needed to decide what came next. I could let it stay buried, let the lie fade quietly now that I knew the truth, or I could do what she'd done, bring documents into the light. Because she thought adopted was the worst label she could give me, she never considered what would happen if people learned why she'd needed that lie in the first place. I closed the envelope, slowly, deliberately. She'd told everyone a story that made me an outsider. What she didn't realize was that the truth didn't make me one, it made her afraid. And fear, when exposed, is louder than any lie. I didn't tell anyone what I'd found, not my parents, not extended family, not the friends who had started looking at me differently over the years because of something my sister had planted and watered carefully. I needed to see how far she'd go when she thought the truth was still hers to control. It didn't take long.
The opportunity came at my cousin Rachel's engagement party, a backyard gathering, casual but crowded, the kind of event where stories get retold and reshaped, depending on who's listening. I arrived late on purpose. I watched from a distance at first, my sister in the center of a small circle, glass in hand, smiling, comfortable, confident. I didn't hear the beginning of it. I didn't need to. I heard my name. "She's always been different," my sister was saying. "You know, considering." "Considering what?" someone asked. She laughed softly. "Well, you know, she's adopted." There it was again. Easy, casual, practiced. This time, though, something changed. Someone asked, "Really?" My sister nodded. "Yeah, our parents took her in when she was a baby. They never wanted to make a big deal out of it." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not pain, not anger. Resolve. I stepped forward. The group turned as one. "Oh," my sister said, blinking. "Hey, we were just talking about you." "I know," I replied calmly. The air shifted. "What were you saying?" I asked. She smiled too widely. "Nothing bad." I nodded. "Good, then you won't mind repeating it." Her smile faltered. "I said you were adopted," she said, shrugging, "which you are." "No, I'm not." A pause. Someone laughed nervously. "Well, that's awkward." My sister tilted her head. "You're really still doing this?" "Doing what?" I asked. "Correcting you?" Her eyes flashed. "You're being dramatic." I reached into my bag, pulled out a slim folder. Not the full envelope, just enough. "I brought documents," I said. The word alone quieted the group. "What kind of documents?" Rachel asked. "Official ones," I replied. My sister laughed. "You can't seriously think." "I don't think," I interrupted. "I know." I handed the first page to Rachel. She scanned it, then looked up. "This is a birth certificate," she said slowly. "Yes," I replied. "The original, hospital issued." Someone leaned closer. My sister's face tightened. "That doesn't prove anything," she snapped. I turned the page. "This," I said, "is a custody agreement from a paternity dispute, not an adoption." The word paternity landed harder than adopted ever had. My sister went very still. Rachel frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, "there was a legal question about my father when I was born, not about whether I belonged here." A murmur spread through the group. My sister's voice was sharp. "You're airing private family matters." I met her gaze. "You did that first," I said. "I'm just correcting the record." Her eyes darted around, searching for support. She didn't find it. "Why would you say she was adopted if this isn't true?" someone asked. My sister opened her mouth, closed it, then laughed too loudly. "Because that's what Mom said." My mother, standing a few steps away, stiffened. "I never said that," she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. My sister spun around. "You told me she wasn't—" "I told you," my mother interrupted, "that there was a dispute, not an adoption." Silence fell, the kind that doesn't invite explanation. My sister stared at her. "You're changing the story." "No," my mother said, "you simplified it." That word again. My sister looked at me then, not angry, exposed. "You didn't have to do this," she said under her breath. I nodded. "Neither did you." She shook her head. "You don't understand what it was like." "Then tell them," I said, gesturing to the people around us. "You've already started." She didn't, because telling the truth wouldn't protect her. The fallout was immediate, but not explosive. People didn't yell. They didn't accuse. They just recalibrated. Questions shifted. Sympathy moved. Assumptions collapsed quietly. Someone touched my arm. "I'm sorry," they said, "not for my origins, but for how I'd been treated." My sister slipped away soon after. No dramatic exit, no final words. Just absence.
That night, my parents asked me to sit with them. "I never wanted this public," my mother said. "I know," I replied, "but it already was." My father cleared his throat. "Your sister, she struggled." "I know," I said again, "but so did I." He nodded. "She was afraid," he said. "Of what?" I asked. He hesitated. "Of being second." I smiled faintly. "I was never competing," I said. "I was surviving." Later, alone in my room, I looked at the documents again, not with confusion this time, with clarity. I hadn't lost anything by telling the truth. I'd gained something my sister never expected me to have: context. And context changes everything. Because now, when people looked at me, they didn't see a question mark. They saw a woman who had been deliberately mislabeled and who refused to carry it quietly anymore. And my sister? She learned something she'd spent years trying to avoid. You can rewrite someone's story for a while, but documents have a way of outlasting lies. The silence that followed the engagement party was louder than any confrontation. For the first time in years, my phone stayed quiet. No messages from my sister, no half-hearted damage control disguised as concern, no jokes meant to soften what she'd done. She was gone from the conversation. And that, I realized, was new territory for her. My mother tried to restore normalcy immediately. She always did. She invited people over for dinner the following week, as if food could absorb tension the way carpet absorbs sound. She smiled too much, asked too many polite questions, avoided my sister's name entirely. My father said less, watched more. I let them try. I didn't confront them, not yet, because something else had started happening, something subtle but unmistakable. People were choosing sides, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. An aunt who'd never called me before invited me to lunch. A family friend sent a message saying she'd always wondered why my sister spoke about me the way she did. A cousin admitted she'd believed the adoption story for years and felt uneasy about how casually it had been shared. None of them asked me to explain myself. They asked how I was. That shift mattered. My sister resurfaced 3 days later, not in person, online. She posted a long, carefully worded message about family misunderstandings, about truths being twisted, about how painful it was to have private matters weaponized for attention. She didn't name me. She didn't have to. The comments came quickly, some sympathetic, some confused, some cautious. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because then something interesting happened. Someone asked a question. If she wasn't adopted, why did you say she was? My sister didn't answer. Another comment appeared. That seems like a strange thing to lie about. Still nothing. By evening, the post was gone, deleted. I sat at my desk and watched the screen go dark, a slow sense of inevitability settling in my chest. She was losing control of the narrative, and people like my sister didn't handle that well. She showed up at my door the next morning, unannounced, unprepared. I opened it and found her standing there, arms crossed tightly, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "You're enjoying this," she said. "No," I replied. "I'm enduring it." She scoffed and stepped past me before I could say anything else. "You humiliated me," she said, pacing my living room like she used to when we were younger, in front of everyone. "You humiliated yourself," I said calmly. "I corrected you." She stopped pacing. "You could have done it privately." "You could have told the truth privately," I replied. "You didn't." She turned toward me, eyes flashing. "You don't understand," she snapped. "You never did." "Then explain it, without rewriting me." She opened her mouth, closed it, then laughed bitterly. "You were always the reminder," she said. "Of what?" I asked. "That things weren't perfect," she replied. "That mom had doubts, that dad had a past." I felt something click into place. So you made me the problem, I said, because it was easier than facing the truth. She looked away. I needed people to see me as the real one, she said quietly. I tilted my head. Real what? The real daughter, she snapped, the uncomplicated one. I nodded slowly. So you reduced me, I said, so you wouldn't feel reduced. She didn't deny it. Do you know what it's like, she said, voice rising, to feel like you could be replaced? I met her gaze. Yes, I said, because you spent years trying to replace me in our own family. The words landed harder than I expected.
She flinched. You don't get to be the victim now, I continued. You made a choice, repeatedly. She sank onto the couch, suddenly smaller. I thought, she said, if people believed it, it would stop hurting. I exhaled slowly. It didn't stop hurting, I said. It just moved the pain. She looked up at me. What do you want? She asked. The question hung between us. Not desperate, resigned. I want you to stop telling stories about me, I said. Any stories. She nodded slowly. And she asked, and I want you to understand, I added, that correcting you wasn't revenge. It was survival. She swallowed. I didn't think you'd ever push back, she admitted. I smiled faintly. Neither did I said. After she left, I sat alone for a long time, not shaken, grounded, because something important had happened. She'd finally seen me, not as a character in her narrative, but as a person with boundaries. And boundaries, I'd learned, were what truth looked like in practice. The real consequence came a week later. My parents called a family meeting. Not formal, not dramatic, just honest. My sister sat stiffly at the table, my parents across from her, me at the end, watching carefully. My mother spoke first. What you did, she said to my sister, was wrong. My sister stiffened. You allowed a lie to grow because it made things easier for you. My sister looked at the table. My father spoke next. You didn't protect this family, he said. You fractured it. My sister's voice was small. I didn't think it mattered. I leaned forward. It mattered, I said, because it shaped how people treated me. She nodded. I'm sorry, she said. I really am. I studied her face, not for sincerity, for understanding. It was there, fragile, uncomfortable, but real. That night, alone again, I placed the documents back into the envelope.
Not to hide them, but because I didn't need to carry them anymore. They'd done their job. The truth had moved from paper into the open air. And once that happens, it can't be folded away again. I'd spent years being quietly defined by a lie I never agreed to. Now I was defined by something else entirely: clarity. And my sister? She learned the one lesson she'd been trying to avoid her whole life. You can't secure your place by erasing someone else. You only expose how fragile it was to begin with. The apology didn't fix everything. It wasn't supposed to. Apologies aren't erasers. They don't rewind time or soften memories that have already settled into the body. They don't undo years of being spoken about instead of spoken to. What they do, when they're real, is change what happens next. And that was what mattered now. The weeks after the family meeting were strangely quiet. Not tense, not warm, just recalibrating. My sister stopped talking about me entirely. No stories, no jokes, no side comments slipped into conversations like barbed wire disguised as humor. When people asked her questions, because they still did, she redirected them. At first, it sounded awkward. She can tell you herself. That's not my story to explain. But over time, it became natural, and that told me everything I needed to know, because silence, when chosen correctly, is respect.
The real shift happened somewhere unexpected, at work. A colleague I'd known for years, someone who'd met my family once at a holiday party, pulled me aside after a meeting. "I hope this isn't weird," she said, hesitating, "but I wanted to say something." I waited. "I always thought you were incredibly composed, but I didn't realize how much you were carrying." I smiled softly. "Most people didn't." She nodded. "I see you differently now. Not with pity, not with curiosity, with recognition." That moment stayed with me, because it reminded me that the lie hadn't just affected my family, it had shaped how I moved through the world, how others interpreted my quiet, my restraint, my refusal to over-explain. Correcting it didn't make me louder, it made me visible. My parents tried in their own way. My mother stopped deflecting. When people mentioned the adoption rumor, because some still did, she corrected them immediately. "No," she would say, "that was never true." Not defensive, not embarrassed, just factual. My father started asking questions he'd never asked before, about my work, my plans, my boundaries. Not because he suddenly needed to understand everything, but because he finally understood that assuming had cost us something real. One evening, as we sat together after dinner, he said something that surprised me. "I thought silence was kindness," he said quietly. "I see now that it was convenience." I nodded. "That's an easy mistake," I said, "as long as you're the one being silenced." He didn't argue. My sister and I didn't become close. That wasn't the point. We became honest, which for us was far more radical. She stopped competing for space that didn't belong to her. I stopped shrinking to make her feel secure. Our conversations became simpler, shorter, clearer. One afternoon, months later, she said something I hadn't expected. "I don't know who I'd be without needing to be better than you," she admitted. I looked at her. "That's something you get to figure out, not something I can solve for you." She nodded, and for once, she didn't push back. I keep the documents now in a small, fireproof box, not hidden, not displayed, just stored, because they're part of my history, but they're no longer my armor. I don't need proof anymore. The truth has weight now. It's settled. And the most unexpected thing of all, people stopped asking questions, not because they forgot, but because they understood that my identity was no longer up for discussion. Sometimes I think about the first time my sister said it. She's adopted. How casually she said it, how confidently, how sure she was that words once released couldn't be pulled back. She was wrong about one thing. Words don't disappear, but they do lose power when confronted with truth. And the truth, I learned, doesn't need to shout. It just needs to be placed on the table and left there. If my sister expected those documents to shame me, she miscalculated. They didn't take anything from me. They gave me something I'd never had before. Ownership. Of my story. Of my name. Of my place.
I was never adopted, but I was claimed by a family that chose silence over clarity, and by a sister who chose fear over honesty. Correcting that didn't break us. It exposed us, and exposure, while uncomfortable, is the first step towards something real. The lie made me smaller. The truth didn't make me bigger, it made me whole.